Ladies and gentlemen, let me call to order our City Council for a regular meeting, Monday, September the 16th, year 2019. If please rise, we'll have invocation tonight by Councilmember Hernandez. And Councilmember Reed will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thanks everybody for being here tonight. If you would, please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for yet another beautiful day, even though it's rainy outside. You know, sometimes rain can be just as beautiful as a sunny day, and you just never cease to amaze us. We are here tonight to do the city's business and to represent all of the people here in the City of Pearland. Please guide our decisions tonight so that we might do the best possible good for everyone in our community. We thank you for, of course, all the blessings you bestow upon us. Thank you for the fellowship that we share up here, as well as the fellowship that we share in our community with all of the constituents, residents, friends, neighbors, and everybody that works together and gives their input to guide this city forward. In Jesus' name we say these things. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now our Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I would like to thank everyone for being here tonight. And yes, we are one of the cities, maybe not the only one, I believe in the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Moving at our agenda, and I'm going to use the same agenda that you have. Roll call. All of our council members are here with bright and shiny faces. Yep, they're all shining. And we find that our city council is delighted and have been very participative in making this city very special. Moving at our agenda to item number 4, citizen comments. Councilman Little.
Thank you, Mayor. We only have one citizen that wishes to speak tonight, and it's on a specific item, so we'll just wait till we get to that item and allow that citizen to come up.
Just the only one. Okay. That item tucked away. Let's move to item number 5, public hearings. We have none. Consent agenda. Councilmember Orlando, would you present the consent agenda? First, let's see if there's any item to be removed by City Council.
Sir, Mayor, I'd like to remove item C, please.
What?
C, as in cat?
C is, okay. Item C has been removed.
I'd like to remove item D.
D and C and D. Doing pretty good here. Any other items? So, okay. With the exception of those two, we'll handle them separately.
Sure. So consideration and possible action on consent agenda items A through J with the exception of C and D. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Council have any questions on this item? There you done, Madam Secretary. I believe we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Orlando, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Consent agenda passed A through J,
Okay.
7-0 with the exceptions of C and D.
Okay. And Councilman, would you present item number C? Councilman Orlando, would you present item number C?
Consideration and possible action resolution number R 2019-208. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good evening. Item C is a recommendation for printing of our utility billings. Obviously, thousands of those go out, and it's a mail house that handles a lot of the back office for us. Did competitively bid this and recommending a new firm here, Data Pros, for your consideration.
Council have any question or comment on this item?
Yes, sir. So this is, just want to clarify, this is a retainer for the amount, so it's not just an actual amount. It's rather we're paying a retainer and it's being drawn against.
Yeah, I don't know if retainer is exact. I mean, it's an estimated amount because, you know, it can fluctuate the number of accounts and so forth, but this is our best estimate of what it would be, yes.
Okay, and then I guess because it's come up before, I just like to keep asking this question, but what strategies do we have to try to wean people off of printed mailed copies? I mean, $245,000 savings potentially if we can get away from printing and mailing eventually. I mean, even if we into just a portion of that.
That'd probably be a better, I mean, this is actually, we're going to be mailing them for the foreseeable future, so maybe if you would let us follow up with you, we can just explain what we're doing and what the ratios are and how that's changed over time.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I just like to always interject that point. Obviously, if there's something we can be doing, I guess we should. So that's all. Thank you.
Any other council comments or questions? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, I believe we've got a motion second on the floor here.
Councilmember Orlando, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Orlando, would you present item number D for our consideration?
Consideration and possible action resolution number R 2019-230. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Word discussion. Staff report.
Thank you again, sir. This is Modern Ivy is a major investment project, private development on the north side of Clear Creek, just west of 288. Multi-use, but primarily multifamily. But they've made substantial investments, obviously, if you've been by there, in the roads and the grading and the preparing for the drainage and other work. This particular agreement is just a modification of their agreement to recognize different timelines and deadlines, so they'll be eligible for reimbursements under the agreement.
Council have any question or comment on this item?
Councilman Moore?
No comments?
Yeah, I got a comment on it. I just want to find out, just a quick overview. I know we got some things going on out the roads and stuff, but how much does the Ivy District actually, Modern Green, how much have they got into the pot out there? Everything I see is with the city and EDC.
I don't know if Matt can answer that off the fly, but it's substantial private investment, so it's.
Sure. On the infrastructure, they have probably $12 million into it, and our only contribution would be for a small portion of the park that's going to be a public park, so it's just not their park, but for the Lower Kirby for the park at about $1 million.
Is that for the land value or?
No, that would be just water, sewer, roads.
It's already
park.
in?
They've given all the money, their entire contribution to the management district, and the management district's probably expended more than half of that already. The last major item that we still have out is the park, and that is out for bids right now.
Okay. Parks and then the bridge across?
In the bridge across, correct. That's part of the park bid.
Yeah, I just want to find out because on some of it, when it looked on there, it seemed like the city was having to front end some of it, and also the EDC was having to front end some.
I would mention we also shared with them on the 288 water line, but that was a water line that they were going to build to their property line, and then we wanted to extend that to the development to the south because Public Works approached us about that many years ago about needing to get the water line down to the Kroger development.
Has the original development out there showed a lot of commercial on? Is that still part of the deal? Or is it just
The commercial?
Yeah.
I want to say like there's probably 30,000 square feet of retail space, and then there's an office, the first block, the first parcel that's closest to 288, that is for office or a hotel.
Okay, because I guess it was mentioned up here last time, it changed mainly to apartments out there in that area.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but this amendment does nothing to change the mix of the ratio or anything with that.
That's correct.
So this does not change what's been already approved.
All right, thank you.
Any other question or comment from council? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, I believe we've got a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Orlando, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Aye. Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
No.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-1.
Okay. If my voice sounds a little out of tune tonight, it's because my right ear stopped up. So I must put a bug in my ear. Because I don't usually have this, and it was kind of strange because I sound mushy mouth. But with that in place, move to item number 7 on our agenda, which is matters removed from the consent agenda, and then we just handled 2 of those. Moving to item number 8, new business. Councilmember, new business number 1, Councilmember Reed, would you present this out for our consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration of possible action, first reading of ordinance 2000M-188. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Staff report.
Thanks, sir. I'll turn over to our community development staff to introduce and describe this item for y'all.
Thank you, Mayor. The item that we have at hand tonight is a zoning change request to change a property from RE, or also known as single-family estate, to single-family R3 and single-family R4. The Planning and Zoning Commission has considered this request at the July 1st meeting and recommended this request to be denied with a vote of 6-0. That concludes the staff report.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, just to reiterate what's in the item, given that, as was stated, the recommendation at the P&Z, it would require a supermajority of 6 members of the council to overturn and make this go forward. So, and the applicant is here if you had any questions. Sorry, report, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That completes the staff report. Council, have any question or comment on the staff report?
Yeah, I'll bite, Mayor. I've talked to the applicant just for the purpose of the public record. I have a personal relationship. I'm friends with the applicant. He's talked to me in the past about it. I've told him I don't see any objection to it. I said that at the planning and zoning meeting. I think what he originally offered was a denser zone, lightened it up, kind of to address some of the requests of planning and zoning, who moved to postpone it, and then it came back. Considering the future land use has this as suburban residential, there's not a whole lot of development in the area, holding it to the RE, which is, large lot subdivision, which we're not going to get out there. I don't really see a harm in us allowing the zone change. There are some concerns about service to the area. I mean, by allowing the zone change to happen doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to concede to pay for any of the service extensions. The developer would have to come into that development agreement independently of the zone change. I'm personally, I'm kind of along with Massey Ranch. I'm excited that there's somebody who's interested in some of these large lot residential areas out in the outskirts. Don't think that the city needs to, offer any incentives to be able to make this work, but I don't see anything that would prohibit us from allowing the zone change. So that's why I'm going to vote yes for it. That's all I have, Mayor.
Any other comments from council?
Mr. Thuman, are you just looking through this and kind of to piggyback on what Member Perez said? Are you okay with taking on some of those additional costs and developer agreement for utility? Because I think was one of my concerns as well. Yes, sir.
Originally, when I came up here and presented this to you guys, it was all R4. You guys had some concern about the density. So when it went to zoning, they had the same concerns. So they asked me to come back with a different plan to split it up and make a section of it R4 and the majority of it the R3. So we know we're going to have to bring the water line. It's got to come down Veterans and all the way up McKeever. It's about 10,000 linear feet. It's about $3 million. So we've already got that in mind. So we won't be expecting the city to do that for us.
And I think also, does he have to state his name and address as well for the record? Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Chad Tooman, 7918 Broadway, Suite 104, Pearland, 77581.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, that was probably my biggest concern, but I mean, if you're okay with it and you went back and revised based on feedback, I don't have an issue with it either. So, thank you.
Darren, let me ask a question. Just on the off chance we allow the zone change and the developer, and this is, I guess, a general question, the developer decides not to move forward with the project, rather than having this zone change, this one tract of land kind of float out there that is zoned separately than the surrounding properties, is it possible for us to put in an expiration on the zone change or a condition on the zone change that it expires or switches back automatically if a project doesn't proceed by a certain time? That way, if the developer decides, hey, look, I've done my pro forma and this project doesn't move forward, the zone change isn't permanent if he doesn't decide to move forward with the project.
Unfortunately, we can't do that with a zone change, a straight-up zone change. You have the ability to limit the duration of CUPs or also if you have a planned unit development that's been approved or a planned development, those have an automatic expiration if no work has been done after a certain amount of time. But that does not apply to a zone change. Pursuant to state law, it would remain intact until it were rezoned.
Chad, I'm going to borrow you for another second. If the zone change goes through, how confident are you that this project will make and you'll move forward?
Well, I mean, I've never done a zone change and not done it. So I don't know if that could be addressed in the development agreement, like a time limit that.
We can't really address zoning a property through an agreement like that, and it becomes contract zoning essentially by doing that. So we wouldn't be able to do that. So I mean, if it's a straight up zone, we'll essentially be trusting the developer to do the project.
I mean, I think there's a little bit of risk on the city's end, but I mean, the risk is that we have a property that's zoned one particular way, somewhat moderate change to the other the zoning around it. But to be honest with you, that the RE is just not going to happen. So I mean, all of it's going to, in my opinion, all the area that's zoned RE is going to end up going to R2 or R3 or R4.
With the split zoning, the R3 and the R4, like it is, I mean, no one can increase the density anyway. If someone came in behind me, they would be forced to run the exact same density anyway. So I don't know what the risk would be with the way it's split.
Yeah, fair enough. Again, just to reiterate, I'm for it.
Is that a question or comment from council?
Yes, Mayor. Can you just say again real quick what the reasons P&Z gave for their denial?
I think the main concern was the density, as well as the fact that the city worked closely with the developers of what will become Massey Oaks to develop a PD where the minimum lot size there would be 55, where this would by right allow 50-foot or smaller lots and a higher number. Massey Oaks will also have higher open space and green space percentage than would be required by code. So Massey Oaks came in, negotiated as part of a PD, and then this would just allow the minimums by right, basically next door. So I think there was some concern about that undercutting the development and the subdivision that they're trying to build there.
What percentage was the city paying for water sewer lines to Massey?
There's substantial extensions that the private developers are doing. They're going to have to deposit large sums for the city to will acquire the property with their money, and then they'll be extending those. So,
Councilman Moore, let me also add to with that is that we're only paying for oversizing on the water line to fit our master water model, but the main infrastructure they're putting in is on their own.
I'd say, not to be argumentative, I can understand why Plan and Zoning would vote that way. I just say that it's PD is a hard standard to meet, particularly when they're negotiated, and a lot of those landscape requirements and some of the other things that are asked in the PD are conditional on us accepting them, and conditional on us allowing the development to move forward. I mean, it would be hard. It would be as if you were saying a subdivision on 20 acres next to Shadow Creek Ranch wouldn't be able to develop unless it was developed just like Shadow Creek Ranch. That may be an impossible standard to meet. So I don't necessarily think I would agree with that argument as a reason to deny the PD. I mean, I'm sure P&Z had other thoughts, but I don't think I necessarily understand that argument.
If I can just say one more thing, the tract of land itself almost, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it has a 3-acre drill site on it, so that's going to be a big green space right there. We can't build on a drill site. The infrastructure that's going to be bringing the water line down Veteran and bringing the sewer over, it's going, comparatively per acre, it's going to cost nearly the same as Massey Oaks. And then the density with the way the R3 and the R4, the density is even comparable to Massey Oaks. I mean, we're basically, with the exception of the Massey Oaks having some masonry requirements, I think we're really close to what they're doing anyway.
What's the amount of R4 you're putting in?
It changed, so I don't remember the number. I don't know if you guys have the map. If I was assuming that you guys were going to have the map that showed the R3 and the R4 split.
Massey Oaks will also include larger lots, so there'll be, they start at 55, 65, 75, and 85-foot lots. So, and again, because of the planned development for Massey Oaks, we know what we're getting, right? It's in writing. The only thing you're guaranteeing with the rezoning is 50-foot lots and 60-foot lots. The minimum, so, I appreciate what we're hearing, but there are no guarantees. And the property sells tomorrow, you get what the next developer who wants to come in to an R4 and an R3 wants to put in. And so, and I think there is a little bit of a difference with regard to trying to create something of value in this area. This is the last really undeveloped parcels, large parcels in Pearland. And so this is our opportunity to make sure that we take advantage of the investment there and make sure it has a long-term return for our city.
And I do see why P&Z made the decision that they made. I mean, at the end of the day, kind of like you just said, it's if the next person comes in, I mean, they could make this whole thing R3 or R4. I'm sorry. So, I mean, there's really nothing stopping that from a full out development standpoint. This is not a PD, so it's not limited in the number of R4s that actually go in here. Let me ask you this, Chad. Why is it that y'all can't I guess commit to the R3s? Because I'm gonna just be straight with you. I'm having trouble, giving a yes vote to this.
Yeah, so it is split. If you look at the map, there's just a small section that is R4. The rest of it is R3. It's not all R4 zoning. So the density is limited. And so when I came in, the concern was we were going to do all R4. So we divided it up. So now you have a small portion of R4 and the majority is R3.
No, I understand that. What I'm asking is why can't what's currently showing as R4 just be R3? And obviously, I understand the financial piece, right? Like you'll make more if you can put more lots in, but there probably was a difference of maybe about 8 to 10 lots.
Sure. So the difference is in the value that's put on the ground. Actually, you're going to get more taxable value this way. We rely on the taxable value through reimbursements through the MUD to pay for the infrastructure. So we can't afford that water line without some of the R4. I mean, I'll put all R3. I'll do even R2 if the city wants to bring me a water line. So
And so have there been any talks or any talks started with maybe connecting, a water line or us maybe kind of working out a different deal? I'm not a big R4 fan. I'm not an R4 fan at all, actually. And so, it's I don't see me living in Massey Ranch and having, this next door. I don't see me living in this neighborhood on an 80-foot lot. But then, I'm not sure what exactly you plan on building on this 50-foot lot, but I could see residents there being disappointed or just not even moving into the place at all. And so, we've seen this before, not necessarily with neighborhoods here, but neighborhoods nearby. Rodeo Palms, for example, they started off at one type of home and one type of lot size, and then quickly moved because of the lack of folks coming in, seeing what they had in other parts of the neighborhood. So, that's really my issue. I can see why all six of the 7 members, or whoever was present that night, voted against it from a P&Z perspective. So, have there been talks? Let you answer that question.
yeah, I'd love to sit and watch that video with you of that meeting. But there's some excitement from and in the end, on the larger lots, we still have to sell the larger lots. So if we thought it was going to hurt the entire development, obviously we wouldn't do it. But our target is, and there's some excitement from the Temple on McLean. Those guys are looking for houses a little closer. So we've been getting a lot of feedback from those guys, and we kind of have almost a built-in market there. That's what we're after. So,
Yeah, I'd just say, some of the R4, for it to be entirely R4, I don't know if I would be I'm 100% for it. For it to be a mix, similar to what Shadow Creek Ranch has. Shadow Creek Ranch has 45-foot lots, 50-foot lots, I believe, so which meets the R4 zone. We have other, Lakes Highland Glen has smaller lots. It's a mix. Those things were negotiated to PD. But we've seen R4 lots. Baker's Landing has townhomes, which are already starting to sell, which those are significantly smaller than 50 foot. I think we have seen that the model of the size or lots that size does sell. I think what we haven't seen is that the 70, 80 foot lots sell. When we have the larger lot subdivisions, or we have the RE or the R1 or R2, we have a problem with those lots selling. So I think right now the market is a denser lot. Most people or most home builders I know are saying that the homeowners just don't want to maintain a lawn. That's why the smaller lots sell. So I mean, personally, at least when I've seen in the area, I don't think the R4 would be the problem selling. I think the 80 to 70 foot lots would be the ones that would be harder for the developer to get rid of.
yeah, ever since Harvey, the cost of building homes in this area has skyrocketed, and so what's now affordable housing has changed. So what you're seeing is that the smaller lots are still in the affordable market compared to where they were. So,
Okay. Any other question or comment from council? Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Reed, how do you vote?
No.
Councilmember Little?
I'm sorry.
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-1.
Okay, moving our agenda to item number 2. Councilman Little.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action. First reading of ordinance number 1023-9. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This starts off our FY20 budget items. These are separate, distinct items. This one is dealing with our developer permit fees. The feature of this one is that it formalizes coming to state compliance and how fees are calculated. And then there's some other updates and tweaks, but this is recommended for your consideration tonight. This is first reading.
Also have a question or comment on that item?
I just had one, Mayor. I wanted to know what the net effect on the revenue was. I know a lot of this was mandated by the state, but just wanted to know what the overall impact was.
We're hoping it's revenue neutral, so it's a totally different way to calculate than we've done in the past. We've tried to run some tests based on permits we've issued, and we're just at or just slightly over, so there may, but I think mostly we should break even to what we would have expected under the old methods.
Thanks.
So no real big cost increase.
That's what we're hoping. We're actually looking to do a study in the coming fiscal year to look at actual cost of providing inspections versus what we charge. So we wanted to mostly just try to adopt the new rules that would meet the state requirements.
A couple of questions on the construction permit schedule. Exhibit C, we're going from new additions and remodels, going from a charge of based on the evaluation to no charge at all. Can you kind of help me to understand what all work that would include under, again, just the portion under Exhibit C?
What page is that, sir?
That would be page 195 of the packet, page 3 of that portion or that agenda item. So it's going to be the fee schedule, development and permit fee schedule,
Okay.
Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C.
So this is for residential permits only, was the ordinance. So those are for commercial permits. We left those the same.
Okay, so for commercial, we'll still go based off of evaluation for any of the work that's proposed, but only residential, we're having to modify the fee structure.
Correct. The state legislation only affected residential permits.
Okay, and are we assuming that that affects the garage sale permit? Is there a reason why we're going from a $20 charge to, oh, I'm sorry, it says no change, not no charge.
Yeah,
So
we just wanted to indicate that we weren't just doing across the board changes.
No, that was my misunderstanding. I had read that it says no charge as opposed to no change. So we're still charging $20 for the garage sale, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I have.
Any other comment or question, Council?
Quick question on the new single-family residential permits. You went from evaluation to 41 cents per square foot. Is that, you saying that one's also revenue neutral overall?
That's what we're shooting for, sir. So we took some permits and looked at the square footage and looked at the tie of what we would get under the new process versus the old. And it's fairly close. We did round up to make sure that we didn't lose money, but there was no significant gains.
It looks like the people with the higher dollar homes, smaller homes, will come out ahead on this.
Correct. I believe the idea is that high dollar appliances or marble, et cetera, don't necessarily call for greater inspections.
Thank you.
Any other question or comment from council?
When will this come into effect?
As soon as it's adopted under the second reading.
10 days after the second reading.
Okay. All right, so it's supposed to be, it's looking to be revenue neutral?
That's what we're shooting for. Again, we kind of have to take a wait and see process. Our goal was to ensure that we didn't lose money, but not to drastically increase anything. As I said before, we're hoping to do a fee study later this year.
You know, in the budget this time, we're looking at several statements made in there about slowing down of building and construction here in the Pearland area. Is that going to have any effect on that that may help it slow down?
I don't believe any of the fee changes will negatively affect future building in the city, sir.
And it's worth mentioning that we're actually over budget on that revenue source this year, so we've exceeded our projections, which are lower than prior years, but we're still on track with where we want to be.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Little, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Moving to our agenda, item number 3, Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1358-18. So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second word discussion. Staff report.
So this is the group of fees that we call non-development, and that would include primarily our enterprise fund, water and sewer. And just for the record and for reminders, we've got a brief presentation. I'll turn it over to Mr. McCarter now.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is John McCarter, Assistant Finance Director. Tonight, we're going to hit on really 3 separate things with our budget, just a quick overview before we dive into the non-development stuff. We'll start with the fee ordinance, move into the tax rate ordinance, and then end with the proposed budget. At the end of each section, we will pause for comment and obviously vote on the ordinance themselves. On the lower right-hand corner, just a reminder to anybody following along or watching at home, you can get all the information presented to Council at pearlandtx.gov/FY20 budget. We will have that updated with the second reading next week as well. So starting with the fee updates this year, we do this every year as a review process prior to the budget kickoff. We survey departments to find out where we need to change things to stay in line with cost changes and needed increases. These are adopted with the budget. Obviously, there's the first reading today. A week from today, we'll have the second reading. Attached to the document that was shared with Council is quite a bit of material. First and foremost is the proposed fee schedule that has the AWWA recommended water and sewer base rates that was changed after the initial presentation. There's a clean copy and then a red line copy immediately after that. That's from pages 5 to 30. And then the original proposed water rates that have the lower base rates that we proposed on August 1st are on pages 21 to 60. They can be a little confusing, so just make sure you're looking at the right thing there. And then lastly, as requested by Council, we did update commercial entities. So on page 58 and 59, you can actually see the difference between the original proposed, the AWWA recommended, and then a bunch of our comparison cities as well. So the fee updates themselves, we'll start out with the Parks and Recreation fees. The Independence Park rental fees, obviously that facility is drastically upgraded. So these fees are just bringing us to where we need to be there. Southdown Park rental fees, again, adjusting for increases in cost there. The special event permit fee increased to $100. That's to recoup some of the cost that goes into administering that permit application. And then the family day pass increasing to $18 and updating some of the definition of what constitutes a family. Public Works updating the water tap fees based on the comp and class study for labor and materials. If you remember, we passed that in FY17. This will be our first update to that. Just trying to recoup what we're putting into installing those tap fees. And then lastly, the water and sewer rates, which again we've discussed in each of our last few budget meetings. These are the AWWA recommended base rates, and then roughly, I believe, a 1% increase on the remaining fees within the water side of the budget. So taking a look at the calendar here, obviously we've had 3 budget discussions thus far, 3 public hearings. Tonight is our first reading for this ordinance. We'll have another one here in 1 week from today. With that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Pearson.
And just to reiterate, we followed the consensus. The rest of the material is there for reference. The effect is that we're going to achieve the same amount of revenue one way or another. It's how it gets divided up. So the residential would be benefiting from going back to that AWWA rates, probably a little over 1%. Versus the 5 that if we kept with the same multipliers, And then reminder that we had 0% rate increases last year, so this is going off of that.
Any other
So
question or
that's the end of
comment?
our, yes, sir.
A complete staff report?
Yes.
Thank you. Council have any comments or questions about the staff report?
How do we change the definition of family?
I'll look to Chris to update that one.
Good afternoon, Councilman. What we did is updated it to demonstrate a family unit instead of allowing teenage kids to come in 5 at a time and receive the discount. So what we've done is titled that to include up to 5 individuals with a max of 2 adults.
Thank you. Is that a question or comments?
I have a couple. See, on page, let me pull it back up. So we had the fees for the Independence Park rental. I was just curious how those were come up with. I'm scrolling down, trying to find the page. But I think it was, well, it's page 13 on the first one without the changes, but here we go. Okay, so the full park for resident 1,200, non-resident 1,800, nonprofit 600. I was just curious if those are malleable at all. If we could just do 1,000 for residents, 2,000 for non-residents. I was just curious why they were done the way they were.
Councilman, the reason that we chose these rates, we surveyed several of our comparable benchmark cities and looked at the most appropriate rate based on amenities available, square footage, acreage, whatever measurement you utilized there. And the reason that some of the pricing for the larger areas might not correlate as the way that you would see is there should be additional and ancillary impacts to the city as far as sales tax and different types of patronage beyond just this fee. There would be also additional fees for the applicant that could go into the special event permit. So this is trying to take that into consideration.
Okay, I'm all right with that. And then I had a question on it says events that are open to the public and that include the sale of anything will be charged the base area rental fee and 5% net revenues. How are we tracking the revenues?
We're trying to be dynamic within the rental agency to determine if they first have a set protocol. Most of the groups that we're working with are using a point of sale type device. So we have the ability to interface directly with theirs. Most point of sales within mobile park type event software is available to just provide this type of mechanism within it. For those that don't, we'll provide an internal keeping system that we can provide in-house for them to keep tabs on what their sales are for the day.
So what about in the event of, let's say, a festival where you've got multiple vendors all using different systems? Is there some way that we could implement a protocol to say that maybe there's a ticket system in place or something where they're having to buy, tickets centrally so that we could track that? Because I just see that as being impossible to track. I mean, and if that's the case, I mean, why even have this in here if we don't have a...
What we've seen from some of our colleague cities is that the responsibility or onus of that is placed on the event organizer, because the event organizer is ultimately responsible to whatever the taxing jurisdiction is for applicable sales tax collections and things within that vein. So we're in turn relying on their responsibility to the state and other agencies and utilizing their documents that are subject to audit.
Okay. Well, I guess if we can just see how that goes maybe for the next year and then we'll revisit that. That's just something of interest.
Absolutely. We can follow up on that.
And then also on page 9, I don't know if this is it says... Just a second. Okay. So under the new residence says default billing amount gallons. Is that supposed to be 6,000 or is it 6 gallons?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, on page 9 of 63 under new residence for the water, it says default billing amount gallons of, it says 6, but is it supposed to be 6,000? I'm just curious.
We have a decimal instead of a comma.
It should be 6,000.
Okay. So would we need to update that?
Since it's presented as a 6 with a decimal, I just go ahead and make a motion to amend that to clarify that that should be a comma instead.
Second.
So moved. Well, do we need to do that here, or does it need to be, this requires 2 readings, so can it be just amended in the second reading?
Yes, we can make that change in the second reading, but typically that change is made at the direction of council. If the council's okay with that, we'll make that change before the second reading.
Let's just make it change. Instead of amending the motion, let's just make the change in the second reading.
that's
You know what
fine.
the intent is.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too.
And would that motion be withdrawn then? The motion to amend?
Yes.
Any question or comment?
Yes, I have one, Mayor. I still don't like that we have the increase in the base fee heavily dependent upon the businesses. That's the biggest piece of this that really bothers me on here, but I understand everything else in here, but that still gets me.
Yeah, piggybacking off Councilman Moore, I just want to know, we have a 5% increase projected for next year. Are we going to do another 52% increase at that point to lower the rate? Another 52% increase on businesses for a few bucks off of the remaining ones? That's something I'm still not comfortable with, but understand that I'm in the minority on that one.
I think the idea is if we adjust the base rate so per meter to where it's more, the larger meters have a larger rate, we can adjust that base rate each and every year, but it allows the rate that we charge the residents for the individual water use. It allows us to keep it down. In the end, we got to generate the same amount of revenue. It's just whether how do we create a model where we're controlling the rate so that the low income users have the opportunity to not feel as much of that burden, and the higher end users, which would be the commercial end users, would be able to feel maybe a larger portion of that burden. But it wouldn't be. I mean, each year we would adjust as needed, but we'd start with this base rate, and then each and every year we'd adjust the base rate up, and then it'd allow us to keep the user rate or the use rate down.
Yeah, and what bothers me on that is that it's not a usage fee. So I mean, businesses can't even reduce the amount of water they use to lower their cost. It's just a hit every single month. I mean, no matter what, whether they use 1 gallon of water or 0 gallons of water, they're getting a big increase.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But I mean, the base rate is there for that reason. I mean, we charge people for $2,000 or 2,000 gallons worth of use, whether they use 2,000 or not. I mean, what the idea is that there's a base level of fee just to be able to have the service available. And can we adjust it? Obviously, the intent here is to try and minimize the impact to the low-income household. This is, I think, based on what conversations we had with staff, when it comes to impact fees, we're maximized. This is really the only tool that we have left that can help us combat the increase on low-income households. The revenue would have to come from somewhere else. So, if we get it from commercial users such as myself, people who own businesses here, and we pay a little bit more, then we can combat the rate increase that hits everybody. But it's fair points.
Robert, can I ask, I think I'd asked you previously if you could just clarify, this is the AWWA recommendations are kind of in line with, I guess, replacement costs on the meters and things like that. I mean, we're not totally off base here. Or, I mean, can you justify maybe, I guess, a little bit more on some of these base rate increases?
I think Trent has been more involved with it, or Neely, and not so much Robert. So
okay,
We defer that over.
Sure. That the base rate is basically a multiplier from the 5/8 inch standard residential meter and how much water will flow through a 5/8 inch meter, and versus how much will flow through the larger meter. So it's just the physical multiplier of how much water will go through each meter. So if you have a larger meter, it'll flow a lot more water. Therefore, we've got to have that much more capacity in the system. And so the base rate is just based on that multiplier of how much water will flow through that meter versus a 5/8 inch meter.
I see. Okay. And I mean, I've looked into some of this. And I guess the AWWA making the recommendation, I guess, for these doesn't lead me to believe that we'll be effectively keeping anybody out of the market on the commercial side. I mean, I don't see that happening. So I think this is a pretty good way to try to make up the difference. So.
Yeah, and I still also have a problem with the monthly fee. There's no governance on a fee. We could raise that fee as much as we wanted to, depending on who's sitting up in these chairs up here at the given time. There's no checks and balances on it. There's no caps. So I'm not a fan of that monthly fee either. The $5 fee.
What's the justification of charging a renter $85 more for a deposit than an owner? They tend to be the lower income group.
Let Cynthia or John answer, but that's come up every once in a while, and the answer is just track record of collections and the mobility, and so those are more likely to not be around and have to. It's the owners, the rental owners, deferring it so they're not responsible for all that by putting it on through their renters, and then we're chasing after they're losing more often. So that's why you have a bigger deposit on those generally. John, explain that better.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, we've had from experience standpoint where we're trying to get the money back and that renter's already gone. So that's the reason why the deposit is larger.
The alternative would be for the rest of the users that, the system would have to make up that if we didn't have a decent sized deposit to be able to cover it.
Thank you.
Any other question or comment? Nice call. Madam Secretary, we have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Hernandez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
No.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
An aye. Councilmember Orlando?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-2.
Moving our agenda to item number 4. Councilmember Moore, would you present this for consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1583, an ordinance adopting a tax rate of 0.741212 and levying taxes for the use and support of the municipal government of the City of Pearland, Texas, and providing for the interest and sinking fund of the taxable year 2019. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of the tax rate of 0.741212, which is effectively a 3% increase in the tax rate. At least 60%, no, I don't have to read that.
Motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a second. Staff report.
I'll turn over to Mr. Carter to run through this and share.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Good to be back, Mayor and Council. So diving right into the nuts and bolts here, the proposed tax rate of 0.741212 is at the rollback rate and at the maximum that was voted on by City Council at the August 19th meeting. That represents an increase of a little over 3 cents from our current rate. Looking at the components of the rate itself, the operations portion of it is a little bit over 30 cents, while the debt piece is roughly 43, making up that total. Looking at the taxable value, which is really what drives most of the rate, revaluations and new growth within the community totaled about $8.5 billion in total. That's a 4.3% increase on the prior year, a little bit under our projected amount, but still solid growth. The budget is based on certified values from Missouri and Fort Bend County. We did get the Harris County values in August, which were slightly higher than our preliminaries, which was nice. Not enough that we want to amend the budget or anything. We'll just catch that back up at projections. Looking at the property tax base in a little bit more detail, the chart shown on the board is I believe in the transmittal letter. It might not be this year. I don't think it is. But this breaks it up between the 3 counties and essentially where we're seeing most of the growth. You can see about 70% of the parcels had a change of 5% or under in the valuation. That is more than we've seen in prior years. You can see from the median home value, we're still going up, which is a good trend. We're still seeing most of the homes within the city growing, but we do see more and more slowing down slightly from the prior years. That's reflected in that less than projected taxable value growth. Looking at the overall tax rate here, you can see historical to the left. The last 2 columns represent our updated projections, which were shared at the last council meeting. As previously stated, this is a 3.2 cent increase in the overall tax rate that is at the calculated rollback rate. This is less than what we were projecting when we put out our materials for the 2019 bond projects that were voted on in May. The $25 million in general fund and $36 million in the debt service fund represents about a 6.9% overall increase in the FY19 over the FY19 projection. That's the actual revenue. What was stated in the motion is the percentage change to the rate itself. They're 2 different things, a little confusing, but we're looking at just under 7% increase from property tax revenue. Looking into the rate comparison in a little bit more detail, we did see the percentage on the O&M side go up slightly this year to 41.4%. The debt service going up to 58.6%. That total amount there, most of the change coming on the O&M side for a total change of 3.2 cents. This is in the budget book, but worth mentioning here, breakout of what we're actually using for these tax dollars. To the left here, in the blue and the red section, is what the debt service rate is composed of. All the way to the left is our MUD rebates. Those are contractual obligations we have with municipal utility districts across the city that we have to pay out annually. This is exclusive of a portion we're paying out of the water and sewer fund for the first time this year. The big chunk of change at $32 million is our debt service obligation. Of that, $30 million was existing this year. The $307,000 for the 2019 refunding is less than the prior amount for those bonds, so we refunded to get a lower rate, save some money there. And then the balance of that is all new debt, either for 2007 bonds, certificates of obligations, or the COs that are issued for the TERS debt explicitly. So the headlines, we did include an annotated worksheet from the assessor collector in the front pocket of your binder. That debt service rate increased slightly to the 43 cents. The reduction on the M&O side to the effective rate would drop revenue roughly $2.7 million. We would need to offset that on the expenditure side, obviously, to keep us over that policy minimum. The reduction to the current rate would be $3.7 million, and again, we would need to realize that on the expenditure side as well. Here, shown in a little bit more detail, is the breakout of those differences here. You can see that the debt service rate stays flat across all scenarios here. That is because we are legally obligated to pay that or charge that to pay for our obligations. The change comes in the O&M piece here, but shown in detail along with our TERS admin fee, which is assessed at properties in the TERS. We get about 64% of that revenue back to the city in the form of a charge for service. Looking at the sample tax bills for the city-only portion, a house with $187,000 of value that didn't increase at all this year would see a change of about $58 or $4.83 per month in the City of Pearland portion of their bill. Looking at 2 more examples, a home that was $316,000 with a 6.1% increase would see $239 annual increase, just under $20 per month. Worth stating that the senior exemption, those residents that are over 65 and have applied for and been granted the senior exemption, they will not change regardless of their value or regardless of the value increase or regardless of the change to the rate here tonight. We have also updated to the best of our ability the total property tax bills. Those are attached to the agenda request tonight. There's roughly 10 of those. Depending on where the residence is at in the city, we're usually about 25 to 30% of the total, with the balance coming from the county. School districts making up mostly, not mostly, the biggest portion of the bill. Municipal utility districts and other taxing entities We also included as an attachment to the AR the difference in the school rates. I think just about across the board, all of them are going down based on the legislation that was passed this last year. I believe not Fort Bend, Brazoria County is also going down. But again, you can see those taxing entities on those individual bills and a summary for the school districts overall. I'll reiterate that we continue to post our budget material online, so anyone following along at home who wants to follow up, everything that council has seen is posted here for that review. Similar to the fees, we'll be back here next week for the second reading. We had the motion made with the applicable phrasing, so thank you, Councilmember Moore. We do need 60% of the governing body to vote, so that's 5 members to vote in favor in order for this to pass the first reading. So I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Christian. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I think thank the staff and council for their dedication on the topic, and believe this. You'll hear that how the budget is balanced, but we need this property tax rate to do that and to fulfill the items in there, including the firefighters and the other staffing additions for our growing city to keep it attractive and competitive in the place we want it to be, and support everybody that all our wide variety of needs. So the property tax rate is a key component of that, and again, it's complex, and I think we've done our level best to try to explain that and show you the recommendation, how we got to the point we are. So for your consideration here now.
Before we get into council discussion, we have one citizen that would like to speak. Diane Butcher, please come on up to the podium.
I think she may have gone out.
I think she stepped away, sir, so I don't think she's here.
Was that the lady that was sitting in the middle? She went out the front door.
Yeah. So then, Mayor and Council, back to you, I believe, so.
Future report.
Yes.
Also have a question or comment on the staff report. Hearing none.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I just want to see if anybody else had anything. I think I spoke out on this last meeting of going with the effective rate rather than the other. And when you go back through the budget and you take a look at the different areas in there within the budget, we see a lot of increases within that budget on there. And it looks like, with what we come out with on the effective rate, that there's going to be additional funds coming in. One that was pretty easy that we didn't have on there was the ESDs, which is $776,000 to be in there this year. And previously we were paying for that out of our own budget, and this is not really enough to pay for everything, but yet and still it's $176,000 more than we got last year on that to do that. But when you take a look at that, and then looking at on this FEMA, that says that we probably will get this in, so there's a probability there of getting in over $1 million in, but the taxable roll-up went up from 8.1 billion to 8.5, which is a 4.3% increase within that. And I just find it hard to believe that we can't get by and do what we need to do on the effective rate rather than the rollover. I mean, ultimately, the whole thing is you're going to get a tax increase one way or the other. There's no doubt about it. But I think, on that, there's areas in here that can be worked with in order to use the effective rate. And I don't know if part of it, if we're trying to come in to, since the legislature come in and put a cap for this next year, 3.5, are we still trying to come in and go with the 8% increase within the budget this year? So I just don't know how that applies to it, really, if that's what we're trying to do or not. But there's several areas that we talked about last time that things could be cut back. to do that. And I don't know, sometimes it just looks like it's easier to raise taxes than it is to control cost. And that's a big disappointment because we sit here tonight, we look at everything coming across that we're going to raise, everything from a park side to a water side through this and those things of that nature. And then also the tax rate is going up. So everything that we have within the city now is going to continue to increase. So for me, I can't, my vote, which most everybody knows, is going to be no on this because I think there's other ways that we can come in here to do. And it looks like that, everything that I've seen and gone back through the budget several times through there, that there's areas of increases through there that, we can get by with coming in with the same amount of 771 on there, the effective rate, rather than 74 cents. So, that's and one, I'll let it go at that, and that's what I think.
Any other comment from council?
Yes, Mayor. Of the budgets that I've done since I've been on council, this is probably the one that I've struggled with the most and I've liked the least. There's a lot of different components to this budget. Part of it is there's a small piece of it that is from the bond, but not wholly from the bond that passed in May. But there's a small piece of it for the bond. But then you look at everything else and it's, it's not wholly related to the bond. We're having to do some other stuff here, adding, some firefighters to a new fire station, some different things like that. And it's a difficult decision to make because I don't want to leave the city stranded and not being able to do what they need to do. But I find it hard with this budget because it's an increase this year. We already know it's going to be an increase next year. It's going to be an increase after that. And that's mainly because of the bond. But on top of the bond, you're going to have a whole bunch of other stuff in there that's going to play part into that tax rate. So for the next 3-4 years, I mean, there's tax rate's just going to go up, 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 up. So I struggle with this. One thing that I would like to really look at is the debt. If we don't take on a whole lot of new debt, I mean, our debt rate, almost essentially goes in half in 10 years from now in 2030. If the debt rate goes down that far, that does a lot for us in the general fund for being able to spend money on the things that a lot of the residents say they want. They want, amenities at the park. They want sidewalk, running trails, and all of this stuff. I just feel like right now we can't afford that stuff. We can't afford it because we can't even put money away to put into our streets and the sidewalks for kids to go back and forth to school on. So this budget, I really struggle with this budget this year. It's kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Let's have a read.
I agree. We are kind of going up high as far as the tax rate is concerned, and probably not putting enough money towards paying off debt. And this is probably the worst budget that I've seen as well. I mean, we're putting a whole lot of emphasis on a lot of things that, in the past I've commented and other council members have commented that, hey, why are we making this move, or why are we adding this person, or why are we not using the money for this? I agree with Councilmember Moore that there are things, from fire to some things in the budget that are definitely needed. But overall, I mean, we're voting on the budget overall, and overall, I can say I don't care for it. But I just want to kind of put that out there. The tax rate, the tax rate is what it is. It is pretty high, relatively speaking, but the rollback is higher than what we were at last year, right? And so, I'd rather us use our money wiser and towards things that the citizens are asking for. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, any other comments, council?
Yeah, so remember Moore had mentioned in 2030 it goes down substantially. That's because of the reimbursements for the tiers, correct?
The TERS ends.
Yeah, okay. So are there, I'm trying to, I guess, wrap my brain around some of this, that some of these projects we're trying to put in line now so that we can make those reimbursements? Is that the case, or is it?
So what are you saying? I'm sorry?
But some of the projects that we've been moving forward with, we're putting on to kind of get in line for some of those reimbursements?
As we said, and as council knows, there's substantial capital projects, public library, sidewalk replacements. There's a whole slew of things that are going to be funded by the TERS, but the only way to make those happen is for us to do that interim financing. So the TERS ends in 2030, but the projections are that I think within 7 years, that there'll be enough value in the TERS to repay us. So even before that, we'll be paid back those millions. And plus, I believe in 3 or 4 years, we're in line to get back the Broadway money, which we can put into the fleet and everything else that we need to do. So there's a lot of good things that are on the near-term horizon for that.
Okay, because I guess I see the bulk of it being the 13 firefighters for, 900,000. Other than that, I think about the stuff that I talk about to our community members on a regular basis. Everybody says they want, I say everybody, a large swath of people with whom I communicate mention they want additional money towards streets and sidewalks and things like that. I mean, that we've got that money in here. So, I mean, I think we're delivering on some of the things that the public wants. And I've made this point kind of to mixed feedback, but the fact that we do have the rates going down on the county side, the ISD sides, I think it's a good opportunity, at least for us, to make some of these investments to give the community what they're asking for, without really having a negative impact on their overall tax burden. So, there are things that I guess I could maybe go through. I mean, I've tried to scrutinize a lot of this stuff, but I mean, even the cybersecurity specialist thinking about, what if we didn't have that? I mean, we did have an attack on, I can't remember how many agencies it was across Texas, and the potential cost if we didn't have somebody overseeing that type of stuff. I mean, it's just, I think it's a good opportunity for us to make the investments to deliver on the things that, the public is asking for us to do. And if we've got tools that will help us recover the cost in the future, I think we should try to exercise those options.
I think since we're kind of conflating 4 and 5 into one discussion, I do agree with a lot of what some of the other council members are saying. When we get to this point, we see everything that was presented way back in February and kind of the reality of the priorities we kind of said we wanted to move forward with. The bill does kind of come back and hit us, and we have to make a decision as to whether we still want to follow through with those priorities that we'd mentioned in our first budgetary session in February, or whether we want to try and scale back a little bit. I think for me, I'm continually disappointed with the amount of money that's available for street and drainage. And there's just not really a way that we found to make up that difference. At least, because again, we're kind of talking about the budget in this item. I want us to try and prioritize any additional revenue that we have that comes in, as maybe we have additional sales tax revenue, maybe we get FEMA money back. If there's any other additional revenues that comes, I'd like us to try and prioritize that into street and drainage. Sometimes we as those discussions come up, that is, we kind of use it for other projects that aren't unnecessary, but I think take away from our ability to kind of tackle some of these street and drainage projects. So at least as this year goes on, I'd like us that to be our major priority. And I think, duly noted with everything the council says, I think we maybe this next February early budget session, we really discuss, whether we want to hold a tax rate and give staff instruction of once we hold that rate, what do we have to sacrifice? And that way it's built into the budget. And then, as we go through, we can adopt a budget I think we all feel comfortable with. That's all I have.
I think on some of this, and brought up a good question on here, that if we approve this rollback or effective rate, either one that we do on this time, we're going to have another increase this next year. We have all the positions that we have in here for 3 months or 10 months or 6 months for this year, the remainder of this year, put in there. But next year we have the full reoccurring cost of 100% of those costs. And if we can't do it on what we got for this year, next year you're going to have another budget increase. One thing I would like to clear up, and it's just probably, well, I know staff can answer this, but we looked at, during the early on period of time when we had the white paper, we looked at I believe it was a 4% COLA through there. No, it's 4. It was 4. I went back and looked at it today. But anyway, that's been reduced to 2% COLA. And then you say in the budget that we're coming in with the longevity pay, which is similar pay for that, and that'll be made in Thanksgiving. Is that a lump sum period for the number of years times months? That's a lump sum. I know it used to be added to the salary or to your pay every year that you were there.
I mean, as long as, like we call it, hasn't changed and it's a lump sum,
Yeah.
so based on that.
And then the other one you got in December of coming in and giving a $2 per month raise on there. So it'd be 3 consecutive raises between now and the end of the year. Is that a lump sum, or how's that going to be handled?
Remember, those are not raises. We have a 2% COLA, which I believe most anybody, but I will strongly argue is below where we'd like to be, but that's what we can afford.
Yeah.
And the longevity is simply a way of recognizing years of service. There's a policy that you earn that, and then we're trying to find some way of adding a little bit, since we can't go any more on the ongoing COLA, and that's the one-time December, which is half of the regular longevity. It's just a one-time for this budget year because we can afford that, but we can't afford more, and we're not willing to commit it any longer. And all the new positions, as we've said, are baked into the the multi-year budget. So we're well aware of the ongoing costs of those, and it's just a practical matter that we can't hire everybody on October 1. So it's not trying to game it or describe it, but every one of those positions are assumed when we can bring those on during the course of the year.
Yeah, well, I was just looking at the total amount that we've done here, and I understand the longevity because that's always been part of cities' businesses for years to pay that, and then that keeps people staying on the payroll and what have you for the additional amount. But in 18 or 17 and 18, we'll come in and made adjustments on throughout that, through what the consultant said that we need to make adjustments to city employees, which would be, competitive throughout the state, and so we did that for that period of time, and so, but I would just wanted to make sure on these that there were lump sum payments, and that's not something that's going to be an increase for each year for the salary part based on the pay periods that we have in there. So, okay.
So if I remember correctly, Clay, I mean, I had requested the value for a 3% COLA, and then we looked at it and we kind of agreed to a 2% COLA. But I mean, maybe just for edification. So the for lack of a better term, the lump sum bonus that we're giving at the end of the year is just a one-time payment, so that it doesn't go into the base rate of everybody. To kind of address your concern, that doesn't, when we adjust next year for a cost of living adjustment, we're not incorporating that. So we give them the 2%. So it's kind of a fair way to show that our employees, that we value them but still managing the budget. I mean, I still personally think we should have given them 3. I think there's no better investment than our employees, but I think it's a good balance.
Any other comment? Okay.
Just a quick one, Mayor. I've said this before. I think we're putting ourselves in a bad situation where we're raising taxes this year and we're going to continue raising taxes over the next 4 or 5 years, coupled with the significant increases in the water rates. I think we're going to have one of the highest cost of living in the city of Pearland of the cities, the local cities. I don't know about the other council members, but I'm sure they're already getting phone calls, emails, verbal attacks from citizens about the increase in taxes, increase in water rates. So this is just, I think, the cusp of it. If this is going to continue for the next 4 or 5 years, it's not going to be pretty.
I agree. I think that's what we, I've certainly fielded a lot of those concerns, and it's not a guarantee that we have to raise those rates. That's just what staff is recommending in order to be able to keep up with the level of service. But again, in February, we can set the priorities and let staff know, hey, we want to keep at the effective rate, and what do we need to sacrifice in order to be able to do that, and be able to let staff know that where we want to make those cuts. And I think maybe it's an opportunity for us to start having those conversations. Maybe we don't want to keep the level of service that we provide the citizens at the same rate. Maybe we want to start cutting some of the services so we can keep the tax rate low. I think we'll field the same amount of complaints when we end up saying we're not going to do as much in the Parks Department, or we're not going to do a Winter Fest, or we're not going to do some of the other things that are that the citizens kind of get excited about. But I mean, in the recent years, we've cut something like the daddy-daughter date night that the city hosted. For those reasons, we just couldn't afford it, and came with a lot of consternation. We got a lot of angry phone calls, but I mean, those are things that we can discuss in February if we want to stay at the effective rate and kind of back negotiate. It's not a guarantee that we increase. It's just it's a recommendation and it's a guideline, but ultimately it's our decision.
I think most of the people, me included, came to Pearland because of the quality of the city. And so the tax rate is one of the things we're faced with in Pearland. We're not through developing, putting our water lines and fire stations in. Because in the year 2000, from Cullen Boulevard all the way to Fort Bend County line, there wasn't anything out there. And we're building in that area, and because it's a lot of expenditures of put the water lines, fire stations, police stations, people serve, roads and things. And once we get all of those things in, it's going to start stabilizing. And it's the quality of the city that brought people here, including myself. And I think we have to remember that when you look at your tax bill, the bottom line number at the bottom is not your tax on your house. It's the taxes you pay on all the organizations that provide service for you. So something we need to keep in mind as we grow and stabilize with our development. I think it's going to start leveling off, and it will start making us pretty happy we decided to move here in the first place. Any comment from council? I don't hear anybody else, council members. Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Moore, how do you vote?
Reluctantly, aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
No.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
No.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-2.
Okay, moving to item number 5, Councilmember Perez.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration of possible actions, first reading number 1584. So moved.
Motion and a second. We're discussion. Staff report.
I'll let Mr. McCarter again recap. You've seen this, but it's worth to go through again. So,
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. I will bring us home tonight. Diving right into the general fund, looking big picture. As was mentioned before, we do have a balanced budget this year, actually contributing $723,000 to our fund balance. That policy minimum is at our 60 days of total expenditures. We originally projected to do that during the budget. We were able to do it at mid-year with some excess funds that we had. Investment in our people, not just the cost of living, but the other investments we're making through professional development and adding people is driving this budget. This does not assume or rely upon any of the federal FEMA reimbursement that will be coming into the general fund, water and sewer fund. When those are received, we will allocate those out at that time. So this is strictly operating and recurring expenses and revenues. The growth in population has mirrored and a lot of times driven the growth in our budget as a whole. Looking at the percentage increase in revenues over the last 10 years, or expenditures, I'm sorry, versus the population growth, you can see that the expenditures have not kept up with the population growth, so we've actually seen a reduction in our per capita expenditures. This includes 13 new firefighters, a number of other positions, and investments in this year's budget. So getting into some of the highlights, obviously the headline is our 13 new firefighters coming on board to open fire station number 8 this fiscal year. That will run 1 medic and 1 apparatus out of that fire station, with the second apparatus coming on board the next year. We have 2 sworn officers coming on board with the police department. I believe they will initially start in the criminal investigations division. We also have 2 telecommunications officers coming on for the police department. That was a high priority identified in the staffing study completed a few years ago. The cybersecurity specialist in information technology, obviously another important piece with the attacks that have gone on throughout the country. We also were able to invest $400,000 in additional street and sidewalk funding, and a traffic crew, and a bucket truck in the traffic division that should offset some of our reliance on our professional services for that purpose. Our GovQA software, relatively small dollar investment, but will help us expedite getting information back to residents when they do their open records requests. COLA, step pay, and longevity across all funds at $1.6 million. That again is that investment in people. The management assistant and human resources department is actually a position that was created this fiscal year and the continuation of that, doing work around a high performance organization. And then lastly, the parks mower package will be able to replace a number of mowers throughout the Parks Department to help us be a little more efficient there. Be remiss if we didn't talk about what is not in this budget. Done a study on PCI compliance a few years ago, established a target. We are $4.3 million short on that funding target. That is to maintain our current PCI compliance, or I'm sorry, our PCI rating. $6.8 million in supplemental requests were not funded. Most of those are staff. You can see with public safety leading the way at 27, followed by internal services, parks and rec, and public works. We talked about at the early budget input session, a 3% COLA. We have 2 built in here. The difference is about $602,000. And then the big number at the end here, we have $15.4 million in eligible general fund vehicle replacements. Those are those vehicles that meet our minimum requirements to be eligible to be considered for replacements. Staffing highlights, I won't go through all of these again. We do see heavy investment in public safety, but also in internal services. Worth mentioning that 2 of the parks positions and the capital projects positions are revenue neutral, meaning they either have a revenue offset or they have an expenditure reduction, making them 0 impact on our overall budget. Our revenue overall, you can see at property taxes, we talked about last time, a $2.7 million increase over our current projections. Sales tax, we have a relatively conservative 1% increase. We just got our numbers in last week, which was roughly a 1% increase, so we're pretty comfortable with that. The charges for services, there's 2 components driving that. The first is the emergency service districts that we have coming on board, and then the the property taxes coming in through the TERS administration fee that is charged for service. Other things remaining relatively flat throughout. Public safety leading the way in terms of the dollar amount and the increase for this year. Most of that increase coming from the additional personnel coming on board both in police and fire. Public Works, you see the increase there. Some personnel, but we also see the $400,000 increase on our investments there too. So zooming out, again, talk big picture. We are balanced here. We have $723,000 that we're contributing into fund balance, bringing us to $125,000 over our policy minimum, that is 60 full days of all expenditures within the general fund. Looking at the debt service fund, we do have $36 million in property taxes coming in this year for a total of $39 million in revenues. The operational expenditures, which we reviewed in the last presentation at right about $40 million, we are planning to use $550,000 of fund balance this year, but we will remain $300,000 plus or minus over our policy minimum. As we've done in the past, we are planning to make a quote-unquote commitment of fund balance to keep that property tax rate down on the debt service side. That is $4.3 million. We do expect to get that back from our frozen values, but we do have that noted here for our commitment. We've seen this slide before. Again, just breaking out the debt service component of the rate between the MUD rebates and the debt service. Broken out below is the existing obligations, roughly $30 million of the 32.6 total debt service, with the balance being the issuances that we just undertook earlier this fiscal year. The tax-supported debt to assessed valuation, what we like to point to as one of our best indicators on our ability to pay back our debt. So this is comparing the assessed value, which drives the rate, to the actual debt we have outstanding. Again, this year coming down, which has been a pattern not just since 2013, but even prior years before that. So we see that as a good indicator. Less of a one-to-one indicator, but we also like to look at that debt per capita, so per resident. Again, the number of residents doesn't necessarily equate to more value, which is what pays that debt off. But you can see that coming down here. So as we continue to grow, we do temper those expenditures to keep this ratio down. Enterprise fund, some highlights we have here. Construction maintenance crew in the Public Works Division, a backflow inspector to expand that program in the Public Works Division as well. The Peterbilt truck and trailer, motor pool investment there, a maintenance supervisor and a right-of-way inspector. We also have an application specialist on the information technology side that will help with the upcoming asset management implementation and other projects as assigned. Again, I won't hit on all the staff here as we've reviewed them in prior meetings, but we do have a total of 8 staff being added to the enterprise fund budget this fiscal year. Some other major highlights, the 2% COLA equates to about $150,000 increase. Supplemental requests totaling $910,000. Our annual vehicle replacement at $824,000. The annual debt service at $19 million, and the water purchases at $5.8 million. Looking at the expenditures by division here, other requirements by far leading the way. That contains transfers out and our debt service payments. A breakout of those was shared in a prior meeting and is up on the website if anyone is interested in reviewing that. Looking at water and sewer rates, we talked about this prior, but these are the monthly base rates that we are looking at the top here, which is the AWA standard. The difference there shown on the right-hand side. The water and sewer rate comparison, this is looking at a residential account with 6,000 gallons of usage for both water and sewer. Shown in the middle there in the lighter background of the Pearland comparisons for this year and the proposed year with our benchmark cities listed. So overall, after our reserve to debt service, we do have $23.9 million of ending cash equivalents. That does more than cover our bond coverage and our cash reserve ratio requirements. We will be adding about $3.5 million to that fund balance to keep up with those ratios. So with that, again, we'll be back here next week for the second reading. Appreciate your time. I'll hand it back to Mr. Pearson.
Mr. Mayor and Council, again, appreciate the staff, everybody working on this for the last several months, and there's a lot of great things in this budget that we're accomplishing, a lot that we're committed to, everything from the additional firefighters to some other obligations, and then just taking care of business. We've also looked into the future with the multi-year and recognize, the future property tax revenue cap and living within our means, and we're well positioned to be able to do all that with this budget. Thank you.
Good. Council have any questions or comments?
I believe y'all had some feedback on the enterprise fund side. I don't know if that was.
Sorry, one more time.
Did y'all have I was trying to think back on. I know you given me some communication, but I forgot already. Do y'all have the info on the enterprise side, on the billing specialist?
Oh, we were able to email that. You'd asked about that this afternoon, so we just sent that out this afternoon, though. John, you wanted to highlight a couple things since we just got out so late?
Checked my email yet.
Sure. Currently, we have 3 billing specialists in the utility billing department. We have 37,500 accounts. One of those billing specialists out of those 3, all that person does is deal with delinquencies. And so, as you can imagine, that's over 2,800 of those we get on a regular basis. That person's dealing full-time with the delinquencies. Then the other 2 split those 37,500 accounts, and they have to pay attention to detail on the issues that come up. So every time a citizen calls that has a complaint about what's going on in the city regarding their water bill, we have a billing individual that will transfer on these difficult calls, will transfer those to the billing specialist. What we're recommending is that we add an additional billing specialist to help with those 37,500 accounts. Plus, in addition to that, the upcoming AMI project that you're aware of is going to be a major undertaking, and there's going to be a lot of discussion both internally and externally. And we want to be, in addition to the residents that we're already currently serving, we want to be able to handle this system in a proactive manner. So when somebody calls up, we can run them through the new system. We can show it how it works. We can show them how they can go in and look at their current record and see what it's been on a month-to-month basis. So we believe that this is a proactive effort in order to be able to take care of our existing accounts and also be able to take care of issues over the next couple of years as the city continues to grow.
Okay, so we've only got really 2 specialists right now for all the accounts.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty pretty thin. So thank you for the feedback, for the info.
Is that a comment from council?
Again, just reiterate what I stated before, as if and when we get
Yes.
additional revenue, then, again, prioritizing street and drainage projects, that's where I'd like to see some of that money go.
On the enterprise that we have here, so we're looking at a 5% increase this year?
No, it's, I believe, a 1%, 1.6.
Yeah, with the multiplier that you just adopted earlier, that brings it down to 1.6 on the residential, right? The 5/8 meters.
Yeah, so we adjust the base rates for the commercial side, and then everything goes up by 1.6.
I have a question. Hypothetically speaking, what would happen if the budget doesn't pass tonight?
Back to go.
The council would have to go back to the drawing board and adopt a budget next week, and then probably call us another meeting or a second reading on September the 30th.
Thank you.
Most items on the budget were in workshops over a period of about the last 6 months. Is there a question or comment from council? Madam Secretary, I believe we got a motion second.
Councilmember Perez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
No.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Little?
No.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Motion
Didn't record
fails.
mine. I just
You said no?
Yeah, I just yawned a little bit. Mine was no.
Motion fails 4-3.
I guess I'll ask the council, what do you want us to amend to bring back that meets us after all this? So it's really up to you.
I don't think we.
What was the count?
Well, the tax rate and the budget are pretty much tied together. I voted against the tax rate. It wouldn't make much sense for me to vote for the budget. So.
I guess as a council, where do we want to give staff direction alternative of what we've given them over the last few months to tell them what we want them to cut on the budget so that it can pass. We have to pass a budget. We're legally obligated to pass a budget at some point. We've already got the tax rate, so now what are we going to do to prioritize spending the money beyond what we've already given them instruction to do? It's just kind of a confusing perspective for staff because they don't really know what to come back to us with that would pass. I don't really know what would pass. I know we had some conversations about what we didn't like, but I don't know if that equated to direction of what particular aspects of the budget we want modified.
Well, I guess we could start looking at the additional manpower. We're adding 8 people to the enterprise fund. We need that many additional employees. Help me out here, you guys that voted no.
I mean, I agree with the manpower. There's a number of things that I have in my book, and I don't have it with me right now. I mean, Clay, I can get back to you, but I can't give you a definite answer right now. I mean, like there's a couple things in there that and speaking to staff, not to Councilman Perez, but speaking to staff, I mean, there's a few things in there that I'd like to see differently. Manpower is one of them. I guess, like I said, I can get back with you. I can look at it or send you what I have tabbed up in my book tonight. But I wasn't a fan, and I voiced that before at the hearings that I was at. So,
Can you put the presentation back up?
So while you're doing that, what options do we still have? Is it possible that we could represent with an amended motion?
I think the best case would be somebody to vote on the winning side, when somebody voted no, to ask to reconsider, and then we can bring it back up. I think that'd be the appropriate thing to do. So maybe that'd be the first order of business if there's any interest in doing that.
Right. In order to continue the discussion, since vote has been taken, there would need to be a motion to reconsider. And again, that would be, as Clay just indicated, from one of the individuals who voted no on the budget.
Somebody needs to put it back on the table by asking for that first.
You just count, what was it?
I think they're going to vote on a motion to reconsider. When?
Somebody failing side from the no side has to make the motion so we can second it and vote to reconsider.
You want to go ahead and make the motion, put it back?
I make the motion that we discuss the budget to possibly reassess and
The motion would be to reconsider the
reconsider the budget.
And I can't remember how you voted. If you were on the
He was on the no side.
no side, okay, yeah.
Second.
Motion?
Motion to reconsider.
I get a second on that? We have a second. We have a second.
Mayor, there's been a motion and a second to reconsider the budget.
Second here.
I'm sorry. Excuse me, just to clarify, who made the second on the motion to reconsider?
What he did.
Okay. Thank you.
So Mayor, if you want to call for that, the question on that, see how that goes. To reconsider.
I believe we got something working here.
Councilmember Moore, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Motion to reconsider? Pass 7-0.
All right, so just to get the discussion, which slide would you like to look at or start at to talk about? John, why don't you put the staffing one, just that seemed to be the one that's mentioned,
For water and sewer?
I guess.
I guess you would look at the ones that you can do without. And what's the total number of employees in the enterprise fund, associated with enterprise fund? What percentage are we increasing by 8 employees? It seems like the increase in the number of employees for that fund probably greatly exceeds the growth in our population over 1 year.
Well,
It's
some of
not
these
all
are,
tied to population growth.
yeah. I mean, it's not strictly to population. I mean, some things like the applications and the IT, cybersecurity are based upon modern demands, whether there was, we've had 2,000 people or 200. A backflow, I don't know if that's related to the new state requirements. We went through the utility billing. Some of these are just trying to keep up with, maintenance span of control. I know that was an issue with some of these things with the supervisors.
Clay, I guess let me help you out. And I'm not speaking for anybody, speaking for myself, but I think what we're saying is that this budget overall, and Councilmember Moore kind of mentioned it, it doesn't really seem like it's directed at the things that the citizens are asking for, right? Another council member mentioned, I think Councilman Perez mentioned streets and sidewalks, right? We don't really put a lot of emphasis on it, but, we're spending money, and we have spent over the past, so many years on more employees, an address coordinator. I guess at the end of the day, it seems like we're concentrating more on the wants of maybe us, meaning us, council and staff, as opposed to what the citizens are actually asking for. I approve the budget. I approve the tax rate. Right. I think the money our money needs to be directed in a lot different direction, maybe towards paying down debt. Where we can. Right. But at the end of the day, our budget is reflective of the tax rate. I just think that we need to put more emphasis on things that are needed. I don't think I or any council member up here, outside of any council member may have worked for the city, can say, hey, look, this might need to be a need that can be taken away. I can't sit here and tell any one of you all, grounds maintenance, we don't need that person, because I don't work in grounds maintenance. IT, utility billing, it just seems like we've when I started looking at what we've done last year, and when I remember what we've done since I've been on council, this is not a budget that is reflective of the needs of the overall city. Yes, ground maintenance affects the city, but where's more money that we've been saying that we're going to put since 2015 into streets and sidewalks, and actually getting these things taken care of, right? Those are the things that I look for. But then I hear, okay, well, we're going to take care of that in 2021, or we're going to take care of that, this year, or in 2030, taxes are going to go down. I mean, we continuously hear about these things, and then there's also stuff in here that comes from a bond, and I think Councilmember Moore mentioned it and talked about it a little bit. That basically things that should have already been paid for, out of that bond, or going to be paid for out of the upcoming bond. Again, that was a statement that Councilmember Moore had made, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure that I could sit here and say, hey, well, let's take off this utility billing person. I'm not sure that Councilmember Little or Owens could say the same thing. It's definitely you all's thing. But I think what we are saying, at least what I'm saying, is I see this budget and I'm not impressed, at all. And it's this, and there's a couple other things that I can definitely give you, once I, get my binders back, and point them out to you specifically.
Sure. And maybe the enterprise fund isn't best place. I mean, like you said, these things, I think, to reflect what our best recommendation for keeping the city, safe from the technology standpoint of serving. I mean, we have heard and want to do better always on our customer service interfaces and taking care of our existing rights of way, et cetera, et cetera. So I understand what you're saying. I mean, these are, on the enterprise might not be the best place to start. These are things that, I don't know what else you could change in there. Go to slide 6, would you?
On the,
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
on the grounds,
Yep,
what is that?
the grounds,
Maintenance?
yeah.
What does that consist of?
Trent, or wants somebody talk about that?
Councilman Owen, that is our right-of-way crew. That's a combination of our crew and our inspectors for that. They go along the right-of-way, check for the right-of-way permits, things like that. So it's not grounds maintenance necessarily always like landscaping. There is some of that involved, but there's also much more to it. But that is our right-of-way crew.
Okay, because that's what I was wondering, because we spend over $1 million a year on mowing right away. I thought if that's what this is a part of at the facilities or what have you, that's something that should be able to be handled out of the right-of-way budget. I mean, that we have in right-of-way right now.
I think maybe for the purpose of the night, we have 3 yeses and 4 noes. If there was one of the noes that felt like there was something there in the budget that they particularly wanted to have modified or extracted or added or changed, that would change their vote from a no to a yes.
That's why I went back there.
No, that would have passed.
Remember, Perez, just to confuse things entirely, I think the secretary, when we were counting, was going on the supermajority from that's required for the tax. The budget is a simple majority, so that was a 4-3, and I think it was 4-3 on that. So.
I thought I heard it failed.
Yeah.
4-3.
Just to clarify, I just went back to double check the charter requirement. Charter requirement requires a majority of the entire council. So even if a council member had been absent tonight, or even 2 council members absent tonight, the vote would have required a majority of the entire body. So in other words, it has to have 4. You couldn't have passed something tonight on a 3-2 vote with a budget. Consequently, the actual vote that was passed earlier this evening, 4-3, was an approval of the budget.
So it passed, so we shouldn't even been having this discussion.
That's what I was going to say. The budget discussion is sort of moot at this point.
I'll just add,
Hold on. Let me make sure that I'm certain, because I want to be fair to everybody who voted. I think I heard 4 no's. I heard a no, a no, a no, and a no. Okay. You voted yes? No, I didn't get the vote. Okay. So maybe that's what we need to do, is re-record the vote to make sure that Member Moore's vote is recorded accurately.
Okay.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we do that, because I think there's some confusion, and I think we owe it to the citizens to make sure that there's a clear vote. So, because I think if I'm correct, if I remember, what the secretary recorded was 4 no's and 3 yeses, and I think we need to make sure that we have that.
I recorded 4 yeses and 3 noes.
Okay. So do we need to make sure, is there a way for us to verify that that was an accurate account?
Maybe just recounting how they
Yes.
voted.
I have an A for Councilmember Orlando, a no for Councilmember Reed, a no for Councilmember Little, an I for Councilmember Hernandez, an I for Councilmember Moore, an I for Councilmember Perez, and a no for Councilmember Owens.
So
4-3.
Is there anybody who disagrees with that record vote?
So the same rule does not apply for the budget, it applies to the tax rate. You have to have a 60%.
That's correct. The primary difference, again, it's 60%, like you said, on the tax rate, which would equate to, in this case, 4.2, so it required 5 people. But on the budget, it requires a majority of the entire council, so it has to be a majority of 7. And that's the difference with the budget, is only if there's any absentees, then you still count those bodies toward that number as what would be required for the majority.
Since we have the motion to reconsider, do we have to?
Then at this point, the motion to reconsider, if somebody wants to go ahead and move to terminate that discussion, we can go ahead and do so.
I move to close the motion to reconsider.
Second.
Councilmember Perez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens. Councilmember Orlando.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Motion to reconsider passed 7-0 to close the motion.
So that was fun.
Move for no. It's hard to make a decision, but nobody wants to move. Let's move in our agenda down to item number 6, Councilmember Orlando.
Consideration and possible action, resolution number R 2019-235. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion? Here, a second. Got a second. Staff report.
Thank you, sir. So the next three are different items, and as we've described in the Thursday packet, and then in each of these, we're obviously in need of a variety of supplies, couplings, mechanical devices that we use in our water and sewer operations. When we went to go renew, the contractor said the price of goods has gone up more than allowed 10%. And so being good stewards, we went out and rebid all of them. They did come back higher, but that's just the way the market's right now. But at least we tested the market. We know that for sure. We did group these together to try to get the best scale and to group them together so that there's some logic in terms of the different vendor packages. So this first one is back to MDN Enterprises. And so the difference is just the types and the details of different things. So that concludes the report, sir.
Okay. Council have any question or comment on the staff report?
Just a general question. Are the vendors for this and the other two items here present?
I believe, were these the ones off the state bid or no? They're here.
I believe so.
Are they here? All right. Thank you.
Question? Okay. Madam Secretary, I believe we got a motion second.
Councilmember Orlando, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Little. Aye. Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0 with Councilmember Little, Reed absent from the chambers.
Let's move to item 7, Councilmember Little.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, resolution number R 2019-236. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. We're discussing staff report.
Same idea, just a different groupings of the materials and use for the next year, sir. So that includes, that's it, sir.
Just a quick question. Do we think the explanation for this is tariff related, or what accounts for the big jump there?
I mean, when we bid them out, nobody really said, but I think that's the underlying, or at least one of the rationale that's affecting the price.
These are metal pieces,
price,
right?
yeah, commodities.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Secretary, I think we're about to have a motion.
Councilmember Little, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0 with Councilmember Reed absent from the chamber.
Move it to item 8, Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, resolution number R 2019-237. So moved.
Second.
Motion second, staff report.
And this is the third and final groupings of those for your consideration. So that's it. Same idea, just a different set of parts.
Another question?
We combine those contracts. Is there a way to get better price?
I think we'd get worse. I mean, we wouldn't. We divided these up so that there's some logic to it, and the scale is still, as you can see, with these three significant. So I don't think there can be any argument about economy of scale or grouping them and just be more. We'd probably get higher prices on some of them that they're not specialized. We made them compete on these different groups. So,
Mr. Pearson, they were all bid together. So if There was one vendor that could do that lower.
Could have, yeah, but that's how we divided them up, so.
Councilor,
These estimates that you have here on the dollar amount for each one of these, is that pretty well of what you actually spent last budget time on it?
I believe it's based on,
Quantity, is
it's
it?
based on past usage.
okay.
This year, yeah.
Take a complete staff report. Council have any question or comment on staff report at this point? There you done. Madam Secretary, I believe we've got a motion second.
Councilmember Hernandez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0. Councilmember Reed absent from the chambers.
Moving to item 9, Mayor, council issues and council discussion. There were none. Executive session under Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, for consultation with city attorney regarding pending potential litigation and confidential legal advice service to the city, to the attorney council privilege. Obviously, in executive session, we could discuss this with the people who are there, but we cannot make a decision in executive session. But when we return to open session, we will address the item as presented. We will move to executive session at, looks like 8:35.
Yes. Okay.
Motion that we,
Council had returned from executive session at 9:30.
Yes, Mayor. I'd recommend a motion following executive session authorizing staff to proceed with litigation as discussed in executive session.
So moved.
Okay.
Councilmember Perez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Councilmember Hernandez? He's out. Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0 with Councilmember Hernandez out from the chamber.
Moving at our agenda. Item 10, other business, none. Adjournment at item 13. We are adjourned at 9:36.